Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create RESTful APIs using Flask and document it by generating API specification in OpenAPI, also known as Swagger format, using API spec and then configure Swagger UI. Let us first create a new folder, Flask API Swagger doc. Flask API Swagger doc folder, and then initialize a new virtual environment. Here I'm going to use pip in env. A new virtual environment has been created. Now let us install the required packages. Pip env install Flask. Obviously we are going to develop a Flask API, and then API spec. This library is used to generate OpenAPI specification in JSON or YAML format, and then API spec web frameworks. This is a library which provides plugin for integrating API spec and Flask, and then Marshmallow, a serialization and deserialization library. Now the installation is complete. Let us check the contents of this folder. As you can see, there are two files, pip file and pip file.log. Let's see the content of pip file. As you can see, all the required packages are installed. Now we shall open this project in PyCharm IDE. And selected the folder and opened it. Now the project is open and the interpreter has been configured. Let us start creating app.py file. Add app variable, initialize Flask. And then create a main method. Let us first check if the application is starting. We'll run it as a debug mode. It started and it is serving on port 5000. Now we will add the first root definition. App.root. Add the home root. This is a first root definition, and let us see if it is up. We'll hit this API using curl http://localhost:5000, and we got the response hello world successfully. Let us now start configuring the API specification. Spec equal to API spec. And define the title variable as Flask API Swagger doc, and then define the version to be 1.0.0 and define the OpenAPI version 3.0.2. And now we'll define the plugins required. As we are using Flask framework, we require to import Flask plugin, and then Marshmallow plugin. And then now we'll add a route to expose the Swagger JSON. App.route API / swagger.json. Create Swagger spec. Here we need to return spec to dictionary. We need to JSONify this response. The server has been restarted. We'll now try to hit this URL /API / swagger.json. What we shall do, we'll print the content of this response. Now you can see that we have printed the OpenAPI response. Here we haven't yet configured any API, so it is empty. We shall now start configuring the actual API. First we will define a Marshmallow schema. What we shall do is, we will define an API which will respond a list of to-do items. For that, first we have to create a to-do response schema. Inherits Marshmallow schema. We'll define the attributes in this class like ID, fields, Marshmallow fields, integer, then title of the to-do, string, term it as string data type, and then status. Let it be Boolean. Let it be Boolean. And then we'll define a schema which will respond an array of to-do. So we'll define a class to-do list response schema. Here we'll define an attribute to-do list, which is a list field, and this list field contains a nested to-do response. Now we have defined a to-do list response schema. With this, we'll start defining the actual API. App.route to-do API, which will respond the list of to-do items. To-do. For the demonstration purpose, we'll define a dummy data return to do list response schema dot open close dot dump. This is an object of to do list with dummy data. Now for the OpenAPI specification format to be defined, what we need to do is, like, we have to add commands so that the API spec will be picking up from this comment. Let's define first. Let's provide the description of this API, like get list of to do. Then define the paths. Now we are going to define it, get path. The description of this path, specific path, is get list of to do's. And then we'll define the response. The response format 200, which is a success response, will be of this format. Description, return a to do list, and the format of this responses will map it to the schema which we have defined. And this, as this is a JSON format, this will be defined as application / JSON, and then the schema is to do list response schema. Now we have actually defined the get API. Once this API is defined, we need to register this API into the specification object, which can be done like opening the test requests context with app.test request context, and then spec.path. Add this path as a view variable, the function which we have defined here. Now we have registered this new API, and if we try to hit the JSON, Swagger JSON again, we will find the new path available in this response. This is a new path to do. We will define some dummy data here, an ID 1 task, finish this task, status false. ID 2 task title is okay, so this has to be title. Finish that task, status, let's say it is finished. Just to test this API, what we shall do, we'll try to execute this command to do. Now we can see this hard-coded dummy data in the response. This is it for the configuring the OpenAPI specification file format. Now we'll progress on how to configure the Swagger documentation, Swagger UI, to show it in the Swagger document format. You can search for Swagger static UI and then download the static files in your local folder. You can extract the static contents and then in your project folder, create a new folder named Swagger and then paste it here for now. Further, what you need to do is you need to create two folders called templates and then static. Move the HTML files under the folder template and rest of the files to the static folder. Once this is done, go back to the PyCharm editor and then do a little bit of configuration in the index.html. First thing is we need to rename the URL to the local URL like http://localhost:5000/API/swagger.json. I hope that is the URL which we have defined. Yes, API/swagger.json. Next, what we need to do is we have to edit all the static resources as a relative path, prepend with a variable, say base URL. Change all the base underscore URL /swagger. Now come back to the app.py file. Let us define the route to redirect the URL to load the Swagger docs. Here what we need to do is we'll add a new route app.route. Let's define it as docs and then another route app.route /docs/ path. This is to route all the static URLs, static files. Let's define Swagger docs path equal to none if not path or path equal to index.html. If this is the case, we'll return the HTML file. Render template index.html and then we'll pass the custom variable base URL, the custom URL, the path /docs. Another thing we need to make changes as we are rendering the template from a different folder name which we have defined it as Swagger, we need to initialize it in Flask template folder. We have to set this custom folder Swagger /templates. Yes, now we have handled the URL for index.html. Now we have to handle how we define for other static resources. Whenever there is a query for any other resources, we serve from the directory. Send from directory static folder. Which path? I hope this should be sufficient. Now let us start the server again. Now visit the page. localhost 5000. This is the default path, docs. As you can see, all the Swagger UI has been defined, and our newly defined path to do with all the definitions. We can try it out from here. Why I'm not seeing the response? Let us debug it. I'm seeing the response coming here, but there is some issue in the documentation. Let us check response. Okay, we have missed an E here in this definition. Okay. Now we shall refresh the page. Then I have missed an yes here as well. Yeah, now we can see the detailed documentation of the response. And now let us try to execute it. And we can see the response body shown here. And that's it for now. Hope this might have helped you. And thanks for watching.